Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of the Andrew Eborn Show, where I'm delighted that my guest again is the fabulous Sitting White Bear. How are you, Sitting White Bear?
I'm not bad, thank you. How are you, Andrew?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Do people ever shorten that when they're talking about names? Do they ever sort of shorten it to Sitting, or you have to be the whole thing each time?
You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, in all honesty. I normally say you can call me anything except late for dinner. So
Sitting White Bear, never late for dinner. First to the trough is all good stuff. I love it. I love it.
Definitely.
We were touching last time about your career and how you started life in banking and how you also looked at working the police for 10 years. And all of those, the driving force, if it's fair to say, for all of those, that you wanted to help people. And you found the
Yes.
frustrations, the admin, if you like, of banking when you wanted to waive banking fees and didn't want to sell them products people couldn't afford. And then in the police forces where it was more admin than solving crimes with quotas and all that sort of stuff. You found that wasn't your calling. But what was your calling was the spirit world. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
And the first experience you had, we talked about, was as a young teenager, about the age of 14. Talk to me about that. What actually happened at the age of 14?
Well, when I was 14, I was gifted a set of tarot cards, actually. And that was kind of my first real experience with the spirit world. I've always had a fascination with ghosts and the paranormal and aliens and things like that. And I always found that there must be more to life. I always felt there was more to life than what there is, if that makes sense, in terms of the physical. So when I was gifted the tarot cards by a friend who said that they'd bought them but didn't like them, I sat and played with them for ages, and I started giving people readings. And at this time, I started. They were like a traditional tarot deck in terms of the suits and the major and the minor arcana. But I didn't really know what they were about or what they did. So I was very much kind of pulling the cards. I'd just do 3 card spreads, past, present, and future. Get the little book out and have a read and literally read verbatim kind of what the book said. And I just found that it was always incredibly accurate with people, even throughout my career in the bank. When you move from place to place and it come up in conversation, you'd have the people say, "Oh, okay, do me a reading," and I'd be like, "Okay," and I'd pull the cards, and and I didn't know anything about these people, and I'd have people break down in tears because they're like, "Oh my God, how do you know this?" And because I'm not one to fluff things up, if that makes sense. I feel like, especially with the tarot will give you direct answers to your direct questions. So, I mean, me and my partner Indigo, we always say to people, don't ask a question unless you're ready for the answer, because sometimes people don't like the answer or they're not happy with it. Because there are some people out there that will say to you, "Oh, love is just around the corner. It's about 6 to 18 months away," and all this stuff. And there's been plenty of times where actually the cards have said, "Do you know what? You need to forget about love right now, because we're loving in terms of another person, because you need to focus on yourself and the love that you provide yourself. Because once you learn to love yourself, that will then attract the love that's right for you, rather than someone who's got their own issues or someone that's going to bring issues into your life. Because when you have unresolved things going on and then you attract someone and you're not ready for that kind of connection, inevitably they're going to have issues themselves, and it's going to cause problems within the relationship." So that's kind of where I started with the tarot. And then from there, it kind of...
The friend who gave you the tarot, and you're only 14 at the time, you said that friend didn't like the tarot. What do you mean by that? What didn't they like about it?
Well, they tried to use them and they couldn't understand them, basically. They didn't really know how they worked. And I don't think they really spent any time trying either, in all fairness. But they just kind of pulled the cards. The pictures were very simple. I don't think they liked them. So they just said, "Look, I can't get on with these. You can have them." So for me, I kind of felt, again, like that was spirit kind of handing me the first kind of sign into that realm, because back then I wouldn't have been able to get my own cards. I had quite a frugal upbringing, so there's no way I could have got them any other means. It's quite interesting. They were gifted to me out of the blue. So yeah, they couldn't get on with them, basically.
So they thought they were meaningless. They read this. They didn't spend the time to study it. You however did. You read up on it. But you say you get, so when you receive a pack of tarot cards, you get the cards themselves. You get different designs. We've seen those at various shops. You also get a book of instructions, and the book of instructions. So the first time you read it, talk to me about that. And who was the first reading you gave?
I can't remember now, in all honesty. I mean, it was 20 years ago. So it's a little while, it was quite a while ago. Honestly, I think it might have even been myself, the first person, because with everything I've always done with the healing and the soul retrieval, I treat myself as a little guinea pig, really, because I'm not going to put anyone through things that I wouldn't go through myself. So it was most likely myself, really. I tell you what, one reading that I did do, and I remember it because I didn't like it at the time. It's a perfect example of them giving you answers. I was seeing this girl, and I pulled some cards about the future for our relationship, and it wasn't good.
Right.
Yeah, it was basically like, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's going to go up in flames.
The cards told you that. So in front of the girl at the time, they said that. So it begs the question then, Sitting White Bear, you must have sat down and asked similar questions about your relationship with Phoenix. What do the cards say about that relationship?
Well, the thing is, in all honesty, I don't pull cards for myself anymore. And even with Indigo, I think she's given me 2 readings in the 5 years, because I'm very much, I'm a bit ironic, really, because I like to live my own life. I mean, there's times where she's given me messages from spirit, and I've not listened because I'm stubborn, and then it's kind of fallen foul. So I do think probably I do need to listen more to that. But yeah,
so
that's
Indigo Phoenix, just to be clear, Phoenix, they're not 2 separate people. In case people suddenly think, who's he going? He's going out with Phoenix now. He was with Indigo a moment ago. But
Indigo
Phoenix is one and the same person. That's
correct.
That's your partner, as we established in an early one. So Indigo Phoenix has, and who gave her name? How did she get her name?
I can't remember, actually. I think it was one that she chose. She used she started off with a different name beforehand, but then kind of didn't resonate with it. So I think that she was given that name herself. She's an indigo child.
Okay. What's an indigo child?
So an indigo child is like a star seed. It's someone that's born with these natural abilities. She's had her abilities her whole life, since she was very young. She had a near-death experience when she was younger, and that kind of accelerated it all, if that makes sense. So,
well, a lot of people talk about they have these near-death experiences, and they say it basically. We have Lorraine Reese. I don't know if you know that, she's been on the show as well, and she talked about the first time when she was very young. She fell down a well. Wow. She was really quite small, and all of a sudden she had these her psychic powers, is what she will tell you, increased as a result of that near-death experience.
Yeah.
Is that similar with Indigo Phoenix?
Yeah, she had she went to the beach with her family when she was younger, and when she was about 4 years old, she ran into the sea and the tide took her under. And I know that she'd love to come on to speak to you in detail about it, so I'll just skirt over it. But she basically passed out under the water and saw a bright white light, and she kind of had this conversation with this being. And then since then, when she came out and was kind of revived, since then she's been able to see spirit. She can talk to spirit, and it amazes me even now, even after 5 years, what she can really do. Some of the stuff she comes through with, like about your granddad, for example, but she'd also tell you like about what his favorite rolling tobacco was, and his aftershave, or what he was buried with, and things like that. Like, she goes in such key detail. It's really impressive, in all honesty. But yeah, she had a near-death experience.
Okay.
I had a near-death experience ironically, when I was around the same age. The first of many, in all honesty. I've nearly died so many times. I fell off a climbing frame and banged my head, and then developed meningitis and had to be hospitalized, and that was very close. So I don't know if that was the start of things for me, because I know I've always kind of had good intuition and good feelings about things. or bad feelings sometimes, depending on kind of where the intuition's going. But yeah, it's kind of, I've always kind of poo-pooed it as such, or not trusted it, and I've kicked myself a few times for not trusting it.
There certainly
Yeah.
seems to be a pattern with the people who I've had on the show, and as I say, always like to keep an open mind and hear what people have to say. A lot of people say, just as you said in the last episode, you talk about that it's easy to spot the fraudulent ones because they make these Barnum statements, as you say, and so on and so forth. What other tips would you give for people to spot the fraudsters?
So the thing is, with some people, they'll do what they call as cold reading. So, for example, right now I could cold read you and say to you, for example, I pick up someone on your partner's side. Are you married? And that's because I've just seen you wearing a ring. I'm not sure, obviously, whether you're reflecting accurately, whether that is your left or right hand. But to me, it looks like your left hand. But when you drank that water, I could see a ring on your left hand. So that tells me if that is your left hand, that you're married, for example. They might also look at you, how you're dressed, your age, and they can pick things up for you. Like, for example, if you see someone that's got a drinking problem and they're not looking after themselves, you can generally tell by their appearance, for example. Or sometimes, as I said, you've got the wedding ring, you've got their age, you've got their kind of their class status as to how they look. So, and also again, they'll do as well is they will throw things out there like, okay, I'm getting a name beginning with C. Does that resonate with anyone? You know, and I'm sure anyone can think of someone they know with the name C, you know, and then they go from there. So what you want to look for is key things. Like, for example, when I do mediumship, or Indigo does mediumship, we tune in and then we kind of feel that person. And it's quite scary sometimes. I mean, there was a time when I was reading for someone. I did a gig at a spiritualist church. I don't often do mediumship because I don't necessarily like it. But I was sitting in front of the person and I kind of opened up and invited someone from their life who had passed to come in. And then I kind of felt that energy come in from my right hand side, which told me it was a lady. And then as I kind of invited them to merge with me and I asked how they died, on my right side of my head, I felt like an explosion in my brain, and I felt all numb down my right hand side, which told me they'd had a stroke. And so you feel that in that moment, and that's obviously very powerful, but also quite scary. So I don't like doing it too often because for me, I do wonder what effect that has on me physically. I always feel really tired after doing mediumship as well. And there's been times where I've done transfiguration or trance, which is where you invite them in completely and your face can actually change and your voice can change to the person who's passed. Yeah. And if you get interrupted during that causes some trouble.
Sure. I mean, we were talking about some jargon busting, if you like, or explaining a little bit more, and then we can dig into the different things in depth. But mediums in the spiritual world, people get classified into different things. And as you say, Indigo Phoenix, she classifies herself more as a psychic medium on that sort of side. And you deal with different practices. Maybe yeah. Let's start sitting right there then with some of the definitions and how people fit into different categories, and then what we'll do in each of these subsequent episodes is dig a bit deeper into each of those. So where would you like to start?
Well, if we start with, as we've been talking about the psychic mediumship, let's talk about psychic mediums. So being psychic and being a medium is two different things. So if you're a psychic, it doesn't necessarily mean you have medium abilities. But if you're a medium, it does mean that you are also psychic. So starting with the psychic ability, we all know we have the five senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And then some people say the sixth sense, which is your intuition. Well, there's the clair senses as well. So you have them in a spiritual form. I believe that everyone is born with these abilities, but I feel that the way that we currently grow up in the education system, it's designed very much about the physical senses. If you go to a Montessori nursery or even an early years foundation nursery, there are set kind of targets that you have to meet to show your development at certain ages. And they are based around being able to determine shapes, being able to walk, being able to handle things, use toys intricately, being able to speak and things like that. But there's nothing that focuses on them using their clair senses. So for example, some psychics, what they'll do is when they're talking to you and they blend in with your energy. So what happens is you've got your physical self, then you have like your aura or your energy body, which comes out of you. You can pick up on the other person's energy, almost like tuning into a radio. And when you do that, what you do is you pick up things from them. So you might see something. So for example, as I talk to you, I might see a big bank check, and with your name on it and a sum of money kind of appear in my mind's eye. So you might see it in your mind, or I might see it physically behind you. I've had that before where I've been talking to someone and it's like a digital clock kind of face has almost appeared on the wall behind them with a time, which related to the time of death of someone that had passed. So that's kind of that you're picking up the energies and you're seeing things that aren't physically there, but they're on a spiritual plane. The same with hearing. So you might hear, that's called clair audience. So you might hear someone speaking to you, or you might hear a noise. Like for example, you might hear a train, or you might hear someone just say a word to you or something like that. And that's obviously not someone in the room speaking to you physically. You might get a sense of taste. So you might taste chocolate, for example, or it can be anything in all honesty. It could be curry, it could be chocolate, it could be anything. You could smell the perfume that you like. You might not be wearing it, or it might be the perfume of someone that's passed away. And then you get, which I get the most of all, which is the clair kind of cognizance, which is just a sense of knowing. So it's almost like I just have information come into my head and it's like, blah. And a number of times I have conversations with people and they're like, how do you know this? And I'm like, I don't. It's just been like, I just channeling that information through. So they're the clair senses, and that's what makes someone a psychic.
Right. It's from the Latin and the Greek, so clairvoyant meaning about vision, so you see it, and clair, you say the audio side is audience, if you like, and then that's you're hearing it. So it works on that sort of basis. And so when you find medium, I mean, do they choose which one they get, or does some just get all the skills, or how does that bit work?
I think most people have the skills and different abilities, but it's like if you go to the gym. Some people are have a natural predisposition to one or two, which are stronger than the others. But generally speaking, it's like when you go to the gym to build up your muscles. If you go to the gym and you do nothing but dumbbells with your bicep curls, you're going to have massive biceps, but you're going to have really small legs. It's the same thing with the psychic things. What happens is people tend to rely overly on the strongest sense. So they keep using that, which then makes that stronger. But then it means that because they're not using the others, they kind of get left behind. So it can be then harder to train them up, if that makes sense. But there are different exercises.
Just to be clear on that, then, it is possible that you can train all of the senses. Rather than focusing, you say with your wonderful gym analogy, and you see these people with their spindly legs and big biceps, you can turn around and you can exercise in the same way as you exercise physically. You can exercise the different spiritualist, the psychic muscles, if you like, depending on which sense, and you do the different exercises. Is that right? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, definitely. I think people have different limitations of how far they can take it, but definitely, yeah.
Okay. So, and the other question then, when we're looking at, say, jargon busting, is everybody psychic and they just need to tune it? Is that possibly how it was? Or some are more psychic than others? I mean, what's the story there?
Definitely, some people are more psychic than others. I do think it does vary with different people, but I feel that everyone is born with psychic ability. I feel like when you're first born and as you approach the time of your passing, you are more connected with the spirit world, which then obviously does have that knock-on effect of being attuning you more to the psychic senses. But I do think that with some limitations for some people, that you can exercise all of them. An example of which is a little bit with Indigo, because she's very good with a precognition. She's predicted on her Facebook a lot of recent events. In the last 6 months, she's predicted over 40 things on her Facebook, which she's put out there. And then she then followed it up with news articles and things like that to show that it's taken place. And then showing people, do you know what? Because there's a lot of people out there that make generic kind of predictions. She's made clear ones and then shown exactly that it's taken place, and again within the time frame that she said as well.
Okay. So what's
I've had
say 40 things? Give me the headline ones. What are the most impressive top 5, for example? What did she predict?
Well, the funniest one was initially before the initial lockdown. She predicted the toilet paper shortage.
Okay, that's a fair
Yeah.
one to predict. I think the one thing which we can all predict is when people panic. They panic buy, don't they? And fear is what spreads.
This was before
than anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is before there was any. This is before there was any of that, though, and that's what's key with it. It's not
Right.
because I know some people, they'll be able to see a trend. She predicted that before there was any kind of hint of anything, really. She said that there would
any
be a
lockdown
virus
or anything else. She just predicted there'd be a toilet paper shortage. So when would that have been? When would that prediction have been?
That was, I believe that was in February.
So in
in all honesty,
before any lockdown, March the 23rd was the lockdown. So she all went February. She says there's going to be a toilet paper shortage. Did she start hoarding? Did she start hoarding toilet paper?
No, we get ours delivered from a company called What the Crap, actually. So they deliver a bit. It's called What the Crap. It's a ethical company that uses recycled paper. There's no. Okay. I'm not plugging them. I don't get.
You're like getting free for life now, sitting White Bear. You can sit for longer. Sit for longer with the safe knowledge that you'll never run out.
But they basically every couple of months deliver a big box of it, and we just put it in the cupboard.
Okay. And they never ran out. They never ran out.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get about a third. We have about a third of the box left, and then the next one comes. So we're sorted. So that's fine. So we never had that issue. She predicted power cuts. She predicted fire tornadoes in America. She predicted the fires that happened last November in Australia and California. That's before any kind of hint of that as well. Like it's all been before. Like she comes in and she's like, I've just had this. I need to write it down. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and it always sounds absolutely mad, and then it happens, and then it's just absolutely crazy. So that's just a few examples.
All of those things. So we'll come on to that. So what would be that? So let's give us the top 5 then. What are the top 5 things which are going to happen, and in what sort of time frame?
What coming up now?
Yeah. So obviously churning out lots of these predictions. What are the top 5? Give me the top 5 for coming up over the next few months.
Do you know what? Off the top of my head, I don't actually know them. You put me on a bit of a spot there because, as I said, it's Indigo that does the predictions, not me.
Okay. Well, we get Indigo on. I think it's a fair point, but it will be very interesting. I mean, simple things. People will say then, okay, who's going to win the American election? Has she looked at that? You'd remember if she did. Who did she say?
She hasn't looked at that yet. In all honesty, she did predict that someone in the Trump family would die, and that was about a week before. Donald Trump's brother died, and she said it would be a heart issue. So that's quite interesting. So she did predict that. I'm trying to think. Has she? She makes so many predictions, and half the time I'm just like, yeah, okay, because I don't really get involved in that. So the best thing I think would be to have her on, and she can go through all of that.
And that's what I mean. You were talking about Barnum's statements beforehand. That's what a lot of the skeptics would say. Is that you're right? They make a lot of predictions, and some of them are going to have to hit, and that's what the skeptics would say, wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, exactly. And she doesn't do that. She doesn't just make a ton of predictions and then 2 or 3 come true. What she'll do is she'll get like an idea of a prediction in her head. I don't even know really how it works with her because obviously it's her ability. But she'll get an idea in her head. And then she'll sit there and she'll maybe pull some tarot cards or she'll ponder it. Or a lot of the time it comes to her in dream state as well. So she'll have a dream and then she'll come in and tell me about it and then she'll write it. So she gets it in varying ways. But but she's definitely the person to speak to about
No,
that.
no, I won't, as I say, I won't put you on the spot because it'd be unfair for you to tell me what she might say. So we'll definitely get Indigo Phoenix on and get some of those predictions, because it's very easy. It's very easy. We can date it. We can put it out there and say, okay, this is it. Here are the predictions. Here's some very specific things. So tell me how that bit works, because I'm always interested in the process. And so when we're jargon busting, you very clearly explained how different mediums work, and you're playing with the senses, and that's where clairvoyant, what you say for vision, and hearing, that's what it means. And you can tune those senses. Are you tuning it into terms of what's happened in the past, the present, but you mentioned, as I say, Indigo Phoenix is looking in the future as well. So are we all on a path that we cannot change?
Yes and no.
Thank you for that one.
It's complicated.
So,
That's
yes and
not
no. You should be a politician sitting right there. This is your
no, I will explain. So basically, so I'm just trying to get comfortable.
Yeah.
So there's something called the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records contain everything that ever happened, ever is happening.
So what sort of records are they?
The Akashic Records.
Akashic.
They are. It's called the Akashic Records.
Akashic.
Akash is Hindu for space.
Okay.
So, but it's basically believed that anything that has happened, is happening, or will happen is recorded in the Akashic Records. My personal belief is that we are a collective organization of like ethereal, kind of like, we're almost like a hive mind, ethereal, and we've created this existence to have a physical experience. This is what I've been shown when I've done plant medicine. So we've almost kind of created this reality. So time itself exists for us in this physical 3D world, but it's not something that the etheric world is tied to. So that is how you can tap into a spirit, kind of, if that makes sense, to speak to them. So with the Akashic Records, it records everything and every possibility, and it kind of goes into like it's a bit sciencey as well. It goes into the idea of the multiverse. So the idea that there is infinite number of dimensions where every single possible outcome is occurring at the same time. And this is where the multiverse and the law of attraction and the spirit world all kind of tie in together. And this is my belief. So that when we basically, and again, this is what I've been shown. So for example, with the law of attraction, when we want to manifest something into our lives, what we are doing is we are almost quantum jumping. So we're jumping dimensions. So there's a dimension where everything is the same, except for that one thing that you want. So when you focus on that, and when you see yourself, for example, say you want that house, you focus on that house, you build a picture of it, what the rooms look like inside, and then you go one step further to feel it. So you feel you're in that house here and now. You feel what it's like to be in the living room, to be in the bedroom, to be where you are with the people, how happy you are with the decorations, how exactly it is. And if you do that, you will then bring that into your life. That is because you are jumping into that dimension. So with the dimensions, they all exist kind of on top of each other, rather than being kind of separate as such. They all exist in the same place, just on different vibrations. So all you're doing is you're raising your vibration to that particular one to match that, to bring that into your life. I know that sounds very complicated.
No, that doesn't sound complicated at all, because what is that then, putting it simply, is that the power of positive thinking? Because you're turning around and say, if you want something enough, you can make it happen. Is that what you're saying? No,
100%. It's the same with quantum healing. My first experience with quantum healing was reading the book called Quantum Healing by Deepak Chopra, who's a medical doctor. He went to the East and was shown quantum healing by a yogi in India. He was picked out from a crowd and asked to meet the yogi in person. The yogi told him that he wanted to teach him about it because with his medical background, he could put quantum healing out there and it be taken seriously rather than kind of airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. So he gave examples where he had someone come to him in his doctor's office who had a large growth on their chest. It turned out to be a very aggressive form of cancer. And he at the time recommended that they have immediate surgery to relieve the pressure on the chest, and then have that lump removed, and then have radiation therapy in order to kind of prevent it from growing. The man refused and walked out the door. 8 years later, that same man went into his doctor's office with a lump on his throat, which was the same kind of cancer. When Deepak recognized that it was the same man from 8 years ago, he did an X-ray on his chest, and there was no trace whatsoever of this cancer that he had 8 years prior. There was no scars to show any operations or anything. When he asked him what he did to heal it, the man just said, "When I walked out of here, I just decided I wasn't going to die of cancer." So it's literally that powerful. On the flip side, he had another example of a man who was a fireman, who was brought in. He'd had some stress, and he said he'd had a heart attack. They did all the tests, and there was no evidence of any heart attack whatsoever in this person. Every week he started coming in saying he had a heart attack, he was having a heart attack, and every week they tested him, and every week he was given a clean bill of health. In the end, they determined that it must be psychological stress that's causing these symptoms. So they recommended that he be retired from the fire department on mental health grounds, basically, but the fire department refused. A couple of months later, the fireman was rushed into hospital, having had a massive heart attack, and he died. And his last words were, "See, I told you I had a problem with my heart." So it kind of shows you, in terms of quantum healing and manifestation, the power of that on both the positive side and the negative side. If you tell yourself you're sick, which is a lower vibration, then you're gonna attract that into your life. If you keep telling yourself, "I have cancer, I have this, I have that," you're gonna have that. If you tell yourself, "I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm well," practice meditation and do them as mantras, then you're going to be fine, in all honesty.
There'll be a lot of
and that's
people,
kind of
there'll be
part
a lot of people.
of
As I say, a lot of people here. Many people around the world obviously suffer with things. You mentioned about cancer. Isn't it unfair on them to say you're not thinking positively enough? Because if they've got cancer, and it's not just a state of mind, it is a physical thing. And saying that some people aren't thinking positively enough and therefore they're suffering cancer, that's a bit tough on them, isn't it?
Oh, no, 100%. I'm not trying to be insensitive to people that are in that position. I understand how difficult that is, and especially when you do have that cancer, when you are suffering from that health condition and you can feel that physically within yourself, it makes it even harder to be positive. It makes it even harder to see yourself as healing that, and especially when you go to a doctor, their treatments are radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and things like that, which actually kind of destroy the immune system, and they're deadly. The idea between those kind of treatments is that it kills off the cells, but just because the cancerous growth grows at such an accelerated rate compared to your regular cells, they kind of take in the radiotherapy quicker, and it kills them quicker than it kills the rest of you. So, but when that is like the line of treatment, when it is sort of take this, take that, and I've known people with cancer who have had a really hard time with it and passed as a result as well. So I know only too well how difficult it is for that. So I don't think that they're doing anything wrong at all. I don't think that they are bringing it on themselves, and I'm not trying to say that the blame lays with them, because it is hereditary, it is the food we eat, it is the water we drink, it is all of that, and it is very difficult, and it's hard in such a busy state of mind, in the world today, where we are always working, and then we go home, we've got our families to provide for, we've got all these other things that we have to do. It is hard to take that time to meditate. It's hard to wake up with that positive mindset, especially if you're not happy with your life or where you've ended up, or things haven't achieved the way you want them to go. It is very difficult to have that positive mindset. It takes, and I give guidance on that with people on how to start to build that. And from a scientific point of view, our brain is plastic in terms of it's adaptable, it's changeable, it's moldable. Whenever we think a negative thought, it creates a neuronic pathway in our brain. The more you think negatively, the stronger that pathway gets. And then so when those electrons have to travel across your brain for your thought patterns, as you think more negatively, and that gets stronger and wider and becomes easier to cross, it becomes much easier to become into that negative state of mind. So then to have to then force yourself to think positively, to force yourself to say, no, this isn't going to get the better of me. No, do you know what? This is going wrong in my life, but I can overcome this. You know, it's called positive framing, but it's very difficult. When I was 18, I was very much trapped in a negative frame of mind. I would have bizarre thoughts about the people I loved being kidnapped or being run over, or all these extreme scenarios where things would happen to them. And it got to the point where I had to start arguing with myself, and I felt crazy because I'd have this thought in my head of like, oh, what if this happens? And I'd have to tell myself, don't be stupid. They're fine. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. And you literally find yourself arguing with yourself, because what happens is when you do that, as crazy as it sounds, it basically then starts to build the positive mindset bridge, basically with neurons, with the enzymes in your brain. And as it does so, the negative path becomes weaker. So over time, you do find that you are being more positive on a daily basis. And science has proven this. And science has proven things like waking up in the morning 5 minutes earlier and just saying the things you're grateful for helps you to adapt to that positive mind much quicker. Keeping a positive journal.
I absolutely endorse a positive state of mind. I think it's very difficult, though, to take it those extra stages further, to say that actually by having a positive frame of mind, you're going to cure all ills. I think that's a tough step, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in the studies that they've done, they have found that it does work in about 20% of cases, which obviously,
well, so it doesn't work in 80%. So that's
and that's the thing. But I think, yeah, exactly. So, but I think also that depends on the individual and their ability to do it, because we are busy, because of our lives, and because there's a lot of people that are unhappy with many aspects of their lives. It is very difficult to do that because, as I said, naturally you do.
I understand that, and that's the sort of, but rather than just being the excuse for the 80% they failed because they weren't positive enough, and this is what I'm trying to get to, is if you're saying that the people who are 100% positive, they were 100% fixed, I think that's a dangerous thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that is the case. As I said, there are other factors, your environmental factors, the food you eat, the drink you have, your lifestyle habits. You know, if you are, I mean, at the end of the day, if you are, for example, eating loads of fatty bacon, then you're going to have cholesterol. You know, that's just how it works. But I mean, interestingly, there was another study that they did where they had 5 sets of rabbits, and they fed them an unhealthy diet, basically the American standard diet they fed to these rabbits. And 4 of the groups, they found that they had ill health and they had high blood pressure and cholesterol, and they found that they basically exhibited the typical kind of health that you would expect someone that was following that diet on a regular basis. But then there was the one group whose symptoms were 70% less. So not 100% less, but 70% less. And they found that through that trial, the reason that was because the person that was responsible for feeding that rabbit, the group of rabbits, whereas the others just gave them the food, that person feeding them was spending time holding these rabbits and stroking them and petting them and then feeding them. And then when they went on to then duplicate that test with many other groups where they were being held and stroked and being loved effectively, they all found that they had 70% less symptoms of eating the unhealthy food than the ones that were just fed. So again, 100% is far too strong, definitely. And I couldn't sit here and say, do you know what, just smile, just, you know, do up your boots, tighten your bootstraps, and just think positively and you're going to be perfectly fine, because there are so many other factors to it. But I do think it does go a long way to help.
So do you think yourself, if you get sick, do you go along to a doctor?
I decided I wasn't going to be ill last year, and I haven't been ill since, interestingly. So I haven't been ill at all.
If you and normally go to a doctor?
if I was really ill, I mean, I've always been stubborn about going to the doctors anyway. So generally speaking, I mean, I went to the doctors before with a really bad sore throat. This is some years ago, and they had a go at me because my tonsils are basically like destroyed because we've had throat infections in the past and not received treatment. So I've always been stubborn anyway about that, but I will always try and do things myself first of all before kind of going to a doctor. Now, I don't recommend that for everyone. You know, I would recommend obviously medical treatment if you feel you need it 100%. But that's what I do.
Yeah. But you would recommend, you're not ruling it out. I say it's quite dangerous, and I know there's a lot of people, especially people who suffer. Are you okay?
No, 100%, 100%. I'm just moving where it's a bit lighter for you.
Oh, there you go. There you've got the light behind you. Fantastic.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, sitting White Paris, sitting somewhere else now, which is good. So love all that.
Yeah, sitting elsewhere. You can call me.
I can see you. No, but it is very dangerous. I mean, as I say, we've got to be very careful about the messages that we give, and whilst we say keep an open mind, and a lot of the language, and people make the point very recently that people talk about being a cancer survivor, or they lost their battle with cancer. And a lot of people object to that as a statement because they're turning around and saying, look, if they tried a bit harder, they would have survived. And the reality is, it's for a lot of people, and this is what the science says, is that it's actually something you can't control. It's not about battling. It's not about trying hard and then you'll get healed. And it's not about just being positive. But there are other factors at play. Is that fair?
Definitely, yeah, 100%. There are other factors, as I said, like your environment, the food you eat, and the water you drink. Even, I mean, I've literally bought recently a filtration system. I had a Brita filter cartridge before, and then I bought a TDS meter, which tests the total dissolvable solids in your water, and there's things like heavy metals, chemicals, and things like that. And I found that the Brita filter cartridge, whereas my tap water registered as 358. The Brita cartridge still registered in the early 300s, so there wasn't really that much difference it was making.
And what another filter. They're talking about the early 300s. What are they measuring?
The total dissolvable solids, so the things that are dissolved in the water. So things like the chemicals they use to clean the water. For example, they did tests before where you could test and you could find the mini pill, which women use obviously for birth control. You could find traces of that in the water where it wasn't cleansed properly. There's chlorine, fluoride, all these different kind of chemicals in the water, which can build up in your system as well. So that's just one example.
I see there's a spirit coming through. There's a message coming through. There's all these ones on your phone. I think they're buzzing every now and again, which is good.
All right, let me just put it on Do Not Disturb mode.
Well, I did wonder it's all good. It's as you say, the cold reading bit beforehand. People are trying to contact you, not necessarily from the spirit world, which is good. But we're going to dig a bit deeper into your particular areas. Right after this in a future episode, but just before we leave this side, because I'm trying to get in my own mind an understanding of some people who say, look, you're on a path and this is how we can predict the future. As you say, Indigo Phoenix will tell you, here are my predictions, this is what happens, and you work on that sort of principle. The other thing is then turning around and saying, look, you can change. There are multiple layers. This is what happens depending on the route you take. If you're positive, you're going to go over there, and if you're not positive, you go over here. How do those two things sit together? Because they're at conflict, aren't they? Because if we're on a preordained thing, which is why people can say what's going to happen in the future, if what happens in the future can be changed, then it's meaningless, isn't it?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I feel that ironically, I feel that if you do have a psychic reading with someone and they tell you things, if you believe it strongly enough, then in a way you're going to manifest that happening. But I mean, I can give you a quick story for this if you like, just quickly.
Yeah, when I left, we have all the time in the world. It's going to be good.
When I left the police, I was working with a landscape gardening company while I was waiting for things to pick up for the massage business, and I was doing long hours again, working long days, most of the days of the week, which is kind of one of the many reasons why I left the police in the first place, because of the lack of home life and the lack of balance. And Indigo came to me and she said, I've got a message from Spirit for you. And they basically said, if you don't take it easy, like you're meant to be focusing on your spiritual path, if you don't take it easy and if you don't follow what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to have an accident and you're going to seriously injure yourself, and it's going to stop you from working. And me, being the maker of my own destiny, probably a bit egotistical in this respect, said, no, I make my own destiny. That's not going to happen. And we were supposed to go away. And she said it was around that time. So she said, with an added kind of layer to the information, was that she'd be obviously annoyed if we couldn't go away because I'd injured myself because I didn't listen. So for weeks, I went to work. She told me exactly what would happen. And I was like, no, I make my own destiny. But for the next several weeks, I went to work paranoid that I was going to hurt myself, because she is always right, frustratingly so. And for every day, I was very careful, making sure I avoided kind of the exact scenario she told me about. It got to like 4 days after her birthday, which is when she said it would happen, and nothing had happened. So I said, yes, I've proven myself right. I can make my own destiny. You were wrong. Probably came across a little gloating, and she said, don't gloat. You know, spirit doesn't like that. No, wait and see. And I was like, no, but I've beat the system. Really happy and jovial. I was really happy because she said I was going to really hurt my leg. So I was really happy that I wasn't obviously maimed, because that's what she said would happen. So the next day, I went into work with my friend and worked the day away, no problem. It come to the end of the day, ready to load up for the next bit of work. We was doing artificial grass. I started to pull off some of the grass from the racking, and I slipped. It weighed 160 kilos. It hit me on the back. I was worried it would squish me, so I dived out the way. End up smashing my leg on the corner of a metal trailer, just below my knee, and I had a massive lump the size of my fist come up. And I couldn't put any weight on it. So I ended up going to hospital, and they thought it was fractured. And it turned out to just be a very, very bad bruise of the bone. But that stopped me working. And I remember as I laying there, after hurting myself, I was cursing Indigo, because as I lay there, I realized exactly what she told me would happen had happened, and I hadn't beat it at all. So it kind of, it threw a spanner in the works of my belief that, you know, I am the master of my own destiny.
So that particular example, I mean, it's all worth drilling down into it. So when I'm asking the question, can you change it? If Indigo Phoenix says to you, you're going to hurt your leg and it's going to be 4 days after my birthday, nothing's going to happen. Was there anything you could have done? So I'm trying to sit these parallel universes together. Was there anything you could have done to stop yourself hurting your leg?
Yes, be less stubborn and listen to her.
but that's the conflict, though, isn't it? Because if you listen to her, so if I asked her the same question, and I guess let's put it another way, is there anything that you can do to change your own future?
I think in that circumstance, yes. If I'd listened to her, and if I had cut back, because initially I was only going to do a couple of days, but then I get into a bit of a workaholic mode. So I was working 6 days a week. And that's what she told me would be the problem if I carried on doing that. So I agreed with the changes, with the increase in work, and I kind of volunteered to work extra for obviously the financial incentives. So I feel like if I'd actually done what I wanted to do in the first place, and if I'd listened to her and cut it down to a few days a week, then I'd honestly think that wouldn't have happened.
But then looking at that example, though, when you're making a prediction, I'm trying to get clarity on this. So when Indigo Phoenix makes a prediction, she could have predicted both, because similarly, if you'd had listened to her, she could have said, well, you won't injure your leg if you do less work or you do this sort of stuff. And then that would have been correct. So I'm trying to work out how, because there are so many variables. You talked about the example she said about, you gave the example about Trump. She said a member of the Trump family would die, or she predicted lockdown before we even had lockdown in February, and all those sort of things. And toilet paper, you gave that example. But at the same time, you're saying that if you listen to it, you can change history.
I think so, yeah.
But if that's the case, then predictions are meaningless, aren't they? Because all they're doing is warning you that if you do a certain thing, this is going to happen. But if you do something else might happen.
Well, in a way, what you said about her predicting it the other way, it's kind of, that is the unspoken prediction in itself, because by saying to someone, if you do this, this is going to happen, you're also telling them if you don't do that, then it's not going to happen. So you're still presented with that choice. So it is a bit.
But is it just drilling down into that? Is it that prescriptive? Is it, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, that will happen. Or do you just make a statement such as there's going to be a shortage of toilet paper?
I think it depends on the circumstances. In all honesty, every prediction is different. So, for example, the example I gave with me, that I feel like that was definitive in terms of if I'd listened to her and cut down on the hours, then it wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, something
that particular prediction, when she said to you, "Listen here, sitting white bear, if you carry on doing this, you're going to bust your leg."
Yeah.
You had a choice. You can say, okay, I can either carry on doing this and I'll bust my leg. That's what she does. But if I don't do that, she gave you another choice. So, well, if you don't do that, you won't. Is that right?
That basically, yeah. So, I mean, because it was a bit more detailed than that. She told me basically that I'd be lifting something heavy. That I'd be lifting. She knew obviously I worked with the grass. She said I'd be lifting a roll of grass heavy. There'd be two other people there, Tom and someone else. Tom was the person I was working with. She said I'd be lifting it wrong, basically, and there'd be a ramp. Like either I'm going down a ramp or I'd hit my leg on a ramp, and I'd really badly injure my leg and possibly break it or fracture it. So that was the terms of what she said. At the time when she told me, it was just me and this Tom that was working. There wasn't a third person. And then when I was going to work, I thought basically by being sensible, I could avoid it by being sensible when walking down the ramps, because we used ramps at work. Just by being more mindful of what I was doing, I could avoid slipping or hurting myself. So I tried to kind of avoid it in that regards. But on the day when I did injure myself, I didn't fall down the ramp. Basically, we had a big digger, a big mechanical digger that was on a plant trailer. So a big metal trailer in the yard. And as I rolled out the way to avoid the grass, it was that which I hit my leg on. So I hit my leg on the ramp of that trailer. And because we had lots of extra work, we'd actually taken on a third person who was there that day. So that's why I kind of was like frustrated, because she was right. Because at the time, I couldn't see how that happened, because as I said, it was just us two working and I was being careful on the ramps and things like that. So it just goes to show that as much as you can be careful and you can be given all that key information in your mind, how you build how it's going to happen. I mean, I imagined the ramp would be wet and slippery and I'd slip over and hurt my leg somehow that way. So the way I'd imagined it happening wasn't how it actually happened in itself.
What's when you discussed this with Indigo Phoenix afterwards, I'm sure she wasn't gloating saying I told you so. It was more, well, you didn't listen to me. What should you have done to avoid that accident?
I think if I had cut down on the number of days that I was working, which was what I was originally supposed to be doing. I was only supposed to be doing 3 days a week to allow time for me to do my spiritual practice. Because I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning and getting home at 8 in the evening. So by the time I got home and obviously having a shower and then eating, it was pretty much bedtime. So there wasn't really any room for anything else. And then on like the one day off I had, I was very tired. So I feel like if I had only been working a couple of days a week, I wouldn't have even been at work that day. So I could have avoided the whole situation altogether. Now, whether
was that the advice on your hours?
It was, yeah, to basically I'm working too much and I'm not giving enough time for spirit and I need to rebalance it effectively. Now, I mean, the question that poses is it like a final destination kind of thing where, where the people try and avoid death and then they just die in a different way? Is that going to be definite to happen and just in a different way or not? I do not know, in all honesty, because that's the nature of the kind of the world we live in. So maybe I was destined to hurt my leg regardless. And this is what I say. I saw.
Yeah, and you can understand that difficulty, and especially with your background as a policeman and that line of inquiry, if you like. You will turn around and say, look, how does that sit? If everything's predestined, how does that fit with the layers and the power of positive thinking that can change those things? Because there are no ways of checking. And maybe what we should do, as you say, we'll get Indigo Phoenix and we'll talk specifically about, because you say you're speaking about her area of expertise, if you like.
Yeah.
But for me, you can understand the difficulty we've got is trying to make the two sit together, where you can think positive thinking can change things, but at the same time, things are predictable.
I think, in all honesty, I couldn't sit here and say I had all the answers. Definitely not. And I think, in all honesty, that it is beyond our capability to understand how it all works. I feel like when we've chosen to come into these bodies, normally we're outside of time, and we're this all kind of omnipresent kind of thing. And then we chose to have this individual experience. For me, I kind of feel like the process of doing that, and I've kind of experienced this when I've done plant medicine and then had to get back into my bodies. I almost become multidimensional when it happens, when I do the medicine. But when I come back into my body, I find it really hard to reintegrate and to readjust into myself. So I feel like in that process of becoming 3D, of becoming physical, we lose our ability to have the understanding, because as a big collective, as like a cloud, basically, we have the capacity for more knowledge. So I don't think that we could possibly understand necessarily everything about that. And I don't think we're meant to either. An example is, I saw someone had written, I can't remember who it was, but they basically, they were sitting indoors with their dog, eating some chocolate, and they dropped a bit on the floor, and the dog ran over and grabbed it. And then what ensued was a big wrestling match with them and their big dog, like trying to pry their jaws open to get this chocolate out of the mouth. Now, this dog is probably confused because this chocolate tastes delicious and it has no understanding it's poisonous and it could harm it. And obviously, but this person knows better. So in that analogy, the universe is that person taking the chocolate away from us because we think it's good for us, but actually there's something better there, or it could do some harm that we can't perceive. So that's kind of how I see things that take place, is that sometimes we do want things, we'd all love to win the lottery, we'd all love to be famous. Well, not everyone, but we all have these things that we love, these dreams that may never transpire. And I think that maybe, you read these stories of people who have won the lottery, and then they give these interviews and say how their life is the worst it's ever been. They're separated from their loving family. They've ended up alone. They've wasted all the money on these weird dreams. And, they've ended up kind of homeless sometimes, because I feel like sometimes, what we do get isn't always the best for us. And what springs to mind in that regard is the Rolling Stones song, "You Don't Always Get What You Want." And the chorus to that is, you don't always get what you want.
Trump won last time around. We'll talk to Indigo Phoenix about this when we get her on the show. But when he ran last time around, that was the song he played, which I thought was
really.
It did, yes, absolutely. And I don't know if he thought he wasn't going to win. Again, this is against Hillary Clinton at that stage. But that was the song which he played as his victory thing, which you can't always get what you want. And it amused me at the time. So you are right. We're going to get you back. I love this as an ongoing. Yeah. So it's an intellectual exercise, but I like the idea. And I still have to wrestle in my own mind between being able to predict something and being able to change that prediction. Because if you can always change the future, you can never predict what's going to happen. And I think that's the thing that we're wrestling with. We'll get feelings. But for now, Sitting White Bear, thank you very much for being my guest.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.